Welcome back to a special live edition of 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers and F-Series, America's best-selling truck for 48 years, and the official truck of the Boston Red Sox. Tom Caron is off on a not-so-secret assignment. He's at a charity golf tournament in support of MS for MS, a wonderful organization working to raise awareness about and work towards a cure for multiple sclerosis. And so, good on TC. But there's a lot going on with the Red Sox right now. So in his absence, I'm Alex Speier of the Boston Globe, joined this week by former Red Sox pitcher and current NESN analyst Lenny DiNardo, who, like me, I think, had his Father's Day a little bit upended by news of the Rafael Devers trade. Lenny, how was Father's Day, and where were you when you learned of the Rafael Devers trade?
That's funny. This is like, where were you when OJ was in the white Bronco? I mean, it's one of those things where you're never going to forget. I was honestly at my in-laws' house. We watched a movie, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Great Father's Day movie. Thank you to
Heard of
my
it?
wife and kids for taking me to that. It's my favorite one, first of all. But afterwards, we went to my in-laws and we are outside just hanging out. Kids were playing in the backyard, and I started getting text messages. I got one from Kevin Youkilis. I got one from Keith Falk, all kind of asking me to weigh in. They're like, "Have you seen this? What's going on? Are you kidding me?" And I ran inside. I went and saw my father-in-law, and he was rushing toward me, and we both had the same news right on the tip of our tongue. And you kind of always knew this was something that could happen, but I never in my wildest dreams thought it would happen. So it was just a stark reality of what could happen and did. So we'll see. Now we're in the fallout.
Well, I love the idea that, like, you were kind of in conversations with people who have been through blockbuster trades, and yet we're still kind of like, there's a shock value to the blockbuster trade, right? Like, when you think about the Red Sox dealing Rafael Devers, like, obviously this was not a good situation, right? Like, this was, there had been a back and forth, and there were moments of this being very uncomfortable. Starting with spring training, he's asked, would you be comfortable being a DH? And he's, no, I'm not a DH. I'm a third baseman. Eventually, he comes around on that. I think, to his credit, he said, I'm in for what's good for the team. Okay, cool. So get into the season. Tristan Casas goes down with the season-ending injury. Then the question becomes, will you play first base? And he made clear in no uncertain terms to Craig Breslow and the Red Sox that first base was not going to be a consideration in his mind. Would they have maybe been able to revisit that question down the road? Possibly, but it probably wasn't going to be anytime soon, even though in recent days he had been taking ground balls as part of his pregame routine back in the field at shortstop. So, I think that when there was this dynamic, when he went public with, no, they asked me to play first base. I said no, and they should do their job and trade for a first baseman. It was like, oh, well, that is going to be an awkward dynamic. You had some experience with some interesting dynamics around Red Sox teams. Like, how important do you have to make a move when you have someone who is not when you have someone who perhaps is performing at an elite level? Let's be very clear about that. Rafi Devers has been great this year, but who is where there's difficulty managing what his role is with the team. Is it necessary to explore a trade there, or do you just kind of say, you know what, we're going to take a step back and give this time to breathe and just enjoy the production and work through it?
Yeah, I think it's extremely easy to sit back and enjoy the production because, he started off extremely slow. We were all scratching our heads, but then he just broke out like gangbusters, was vintage Rafael Devers and more. But if you go back to early in spring training, again, going back to when they asked him to put the glove away, to be the DH, and his answers were extremely abrupt and short. And it was just basically before the question was outside of the media's mouth, he said, no, no, that's not me. And I think that says a lot. That says a lot, when it comes to being a team player. And yes, maybe communication wasn't great. Maybe it kind of took him by surprise. I get that. But when it comes down to it, I feel like you have to look at the name on the front of your shirt and make sure that that takes precedent over the name on the back of your shirt. Yes, you're making a lot of money. Yes, you're an extremely talented ball player. You're going to help whatever organization you're in go out and win ball games. But at the end of the day, if you're not pulling in the same direction on that rope as everybody else and making sacrifices, when you're on the team, you have to make sacrifices, and you can't be in a dinghy when everybody else is in a separate boat, right? You have to get there and pull an oar together. And especially when you're the face of the franchise, whether he wanted to be or not, you got to go out there and make some sort of sacrifice and say, whether you like it or not, you know what? I'm going to help this team. Yeah, I felt disrespected. I felt like communication wasn't there, but I'm going to be the bigger man. I'm going to help this team because, yes, they signed a guy in Alex Bregman that, statistically speaking, is a better third baseman, right? So at the end of the day, it's about going out there and helping this team win ball games, doing what you can do day in and day out to do that. And I just don't think the Red Sox saw that as a viable option when they went out to Kansas City and they brought all the brass, literally almost just about everybody, to come talk to him. There was just, I mean, nothing had really happened after that, you know, and the fact that he has a glove in the infield now with his warm-ups, I'm not sure if he's doing that or if he was doing that to mess with people or if it is part of his warm-ups. I just don't know. So again, it's mind-boggling. You knew this kind of could happen, but we'll see what happens.
Well, so I'm interested in your perspective because you were part of the 2004 team, and famously there were a couple of players who Manny Ramirez was a player who the Red Sox were constantly managing over the course of his tenure with the Red Sox. Ultimately, ended up being traded in 2008. There had been previous attempts, basically annually, to trade him that did not materialize. Like, you were also part of the 2005 team where Manny Ramirez ended up kind of, oh, we have to trade Manny. And then no, like, Manny sticks around, and then he has a game-winning single on the day of the trade deadline and says, like, I love it here. This is, I love Boston. At the same time, you had Nomar Garciaparra in 2004, where there were, I think that there was a question about the clubhouse dynamics that were involved with him. Like, were you were, to be clear, you were on the disabled list for most of the second half of 2004. Nonetheless, you were very much in that clubhouse and of that team. Like, as a young player making sense of those clubhouse dynamics, how different was it to get rid of a star? Like, how different was the clubhouse after getting rid of a star player in Nomar? And what was that felt? Did that translate on field in your view?
So yeah, as a youngster, you recognize pretty early your role is to keep your eyes and your ears open and your mouth shut. So there's a lot of listening, there's a lot of paying attention. And Nomar was great to me. He was, he never really treated me like a rookie. Certain players on the team did. That's totally fine. That was part of the culture back then. You got hazed and you had to carry the beer, the bags for the veteran ball players. But Nomar was the type of guy for me that always, took time to talk to me and see how I was doing as a person, and I was appreciated that and respected that. But with that said, it took everybody by surprise when Nomar was dealt. But again, it goes back to Theo trying to put the best team on the field and in the best dynamic in the clubhouse as well. So my feelings toward Nomar it could be different than any of the other players in that clubhouse as well. So I can't speak to them, but he went out and got a great shortstop in Orlando Cabrera, right? He went out there and got a great teammate in Orlando Cabrera. I saw him last week, and he's still around, lives in New Hampshire. He's always golfing.
Yeah.
And, but again, I think it speaks to where we needed to be and where we needed to go in order to win a World Series. And Theo was not afraid to make tough decisions. And I'm sure that was an extremely tough decision because Nomar was the face of the franchise. This is Nomar. This is the guy that was on SNL and on the magazines and the iconic photo with him on the bat with the shirt off and everything. This is it was a tough decision, right? But at the end of the day, he did what he needed to do to go out there and help this 2004 Red Sox win a championship. And hindsight's 2020, it worked. If it didn't work out, who knows what we'd be talking about right now in regards to Nomar. But it's a thankless job in many aspects, being a GM and a front office guy, because sometimes these decisions work out and sometimes they don't. But it's a very tough decision nonetheless.
The interesting thing that you raise is in the case of the Nomar trade, obviously there was kind of it was trading out one position, right? Nomar is gone as the shortstop, and you're bringing back Orlando Cabrera. In the case of the Red Sox, Rafael Devers has been easily their best hitter through the course of, these first couple of months, 2.5 months of the season. And that has not been the case for, they did not bring back a hitter. So, there's a big question about how you go about whether or not did they do enough to replace him. But that is a question that we will visit, that you and I will circle back on. Right now, this is the beauty of a live podcast. We are going to be joined by another guest who has experience with crazy in-season trades. Javier Lopez, a veteran of the Red Sox, a veteran of the Giants. Javi, it is great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on 310 to Left.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out, Lenny. Alex, good to see you guys. It's been a while.
No
Can
kidding.
I say
No
that obviously one of us is aging in dog years, and one of us is you're like Benjamin Button over here. You haven't changed in 20 years, so good on you, man.
Wow, thank you. I only the finest juices and berries for me. What can I say?
Lotions and
Great.
creams, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Let's all be focused on antioxidants. I could use a few this morning after having a late night trying to make sense of this. But Javi, really grateful for you to be able to join, because you have the perspective of, as a 4-time World Series champion with the Red Sox, as well as 3 times with the Giants. Buster Posey. About about the Giants culture. You followed that team closely. You know what Rafael Devers will mean to them. You also have the experience of being a part of a Red Sox championship team, and then seeing Manny Ramirez traded in 2008. So how much, as you saw this Devers trade going down, was that your parallel? Did you think this is kind of like what I saw in 2008 with Manny?
I think there was a little bit of that. I feel like when I looked at this trade, it was kind of interesting. I was calling the series for the Giants with the Rockies. And so I was out there in Denver, and Buster shows up on the last day, and he's just telling me, we really need an impact bat. We really need an impact bat. And I was like, yeah, you have nothing but arms. People always need starting pitching. And in my mind, I was thinking, maybe something with the Orioles, who've had a down year. And there's always been conversation about the Red Sox. And even if you look at Rafi Devers, I was like, man, that's a big contract to take for the Giants, but it would be an interesting piece. And we just kind of were talking back and forth. And then he doesn't show any cards or anything. And then next thing you know, he pulls off this trade. And it made me think more, not so much with the Manny trade, other than Manny was a little disgruntled, I guess, in 2008 from what I remember. And I could see that aspect of it. But as far as, it's just, for me, it's just more recent. So it would have been that Mookie Betts, like you're moving on from a guy that you picked as your cornerstone piece. And now the Red Sox again are out trying to figure this out. So I think it's a great move for the Giants to get an impact bat. They've needed one for a while. And for the Red Sox, it's an interesting one, because it's a lot of guys that, Kyle Harrison is an intriguing piece. He hasn't reached his full potential. There's been flashes of it, but it's a guy that struggles with consistency with his command. The velocity at the top rail of his fastball plays the opponent, the OPS on that is pretty low. So it is just something where they need to try to figure out how to refine that. And maybe Andrew Bailey has that. He has some experience with him. Jordan Hicks, we've already seen what kind of power arm he has in high leverage spots with the Cardinals. And even with the Giants, he was able to pitch out of the pen. But his velocity kind of disappears at times. And that'll be something for them to figure out as well. And Tibbs, you never know, right? It's a first-round pick from last year. So that guy, they might strike, but you never know. And Bello, same kind of thing. Like, you don't know what you have. He's such a young pitcher. But for the Giants' needs, it's a great move.
So you had seen a lot of cuts. Oh, go ahead, Lenny.
No, for me, I'm looking at this and the return. I mean, there's a lot of what ifs, maybes. Can they help the team out? But for me, when I look at the move overall, this just tells me they wanted to get rid of Devers, because yeah, you've got some what ifs, you've got the Andrew Bailey effect, and maybe he could turn these youngsters around and kind of get something out of the berry, so to speak. But looking at it, it's so lopsided because this is again a cornerstone athlete. This is a guy who's been around quite some time. He's been very consistent throughout his career. That just tells me it's a dump, right? Just try to dump the contract, go out there and get whatever you can at the time, and just move on from there. I don't know if everybody agrees with that, but it's kind of the way I looked at it right away.
Yeah, I do think that that is a valid point when you look at it. I mean, again, it's a guy that you've extended just a couple years ago. So can things sour that quickly for one of the greatest hitters in baseball right now? I mean, has what's got over 900 OPS, and I mean he's just been one of the top players and one of the key bats that you've clearly identified as a person that you wanted to extend. So there's something behind the scenes there. You guys obviously will tap into that a little bit better than I can, but there is something going on there. And for me, big picture, when I look back at this, I was like, all right, so you're paying him $27 million, right? Because he had that signing bonus. So yeah, you're on $27 million for the rest of this way, and that's a lot. There's no question about that. But you're looking at the free agency landmark market, like the upcoming guys. Maybe I think Kyle Tucker would probably be the number one on that list, and you just had Vlad Guerrero signed for 500. So it's hard to say this and not smile, but $27 million might be a bargain.
Yeah, I had been, increasingly, especially when Vlad Guerrero signed for $500 million. He's what, 1 year age difference from Rafael Devers, and it's like, well, the reason why Vlad Guerrero got signed was because of his bat. And so if you were just to compare apples to apples, Vlad's bat and Rafi's bat, like the distinction is not that great. Like these are both these are both spectacular hitters who, you probably put in the top, in the top 10 to 20 hitters in all of baseball. Devers right now has been, to me, the best version that I've ever seen of him. You mentioned Buster Posey's interest in finding that bat. Like, as someone who follows the Giants closely, can you just explain, like, how difficult has it been for the Giants to find the true superstar bat? How much has this been a years-long project for them, to kind of chase the white whale of, like, can we find one of the game's truly elite offensive contributors?
Well, you've seen it with free agency, and Buster Posey was a guy that they brought in to be a closer for a couple of them with Bryce Harper and maybe some of the other ones while he was still playing. Just ultimately, they never got the rose at the end of this, and that's the ultimate issue for the Giants. And they've done a great job developing pitching, and I think that's the strength that they have. They have arms in AAA, and they've got some young talent up there in the big leagues now. It's starting pitching, not only relievers, but starting pitching that they could at least entertain, maybe making another move. But it's one of those organizations where you're going to have to develop pitching and trade it to get a bat. That's just kind of where it's been. Free agents don't want to go there to play. And that's the one thing about baseball, right? You can set up your team however you want because you can set up your ballpark however you want. And Giants have always been about pitching and defense for success at Oracle. And it's happened. I mean, they've been able to win. I was part of 3 championships there. So it's not that the formula doesn't work. It's just not always the sexiest formula for a lot of sports fans. When you get a lot of 3-2 ball games, you do enjoy a blowout with a bunch of homers. And so I do think that is something that the Giants are trying to find a way to get to 4 runs, because if they get to 4 runs, they got a decent chance of winning a lot of ball games. Even this weekend, they lose 2 or 3 to the Dodgers, but you're still 1 game out. And you look at the 2 lineups, and there's a stark contrast between what the Dodgers are running out there and what the Giants are running out there. So an impact bat, middle of the order bat, a guy that likes to play every day. It's going to hopefully prove to be very beneficial for the Giants. But again, it just gives you not only that, it gives you a balance with a lefty as well, being that impact bat.
Yeah, I mean, at 41-30, like you said, 1 game back. Last 10, they're 8-2. Oftentimes we look at the trade deadline to make that run. But if you can, why not start earlier? You could go on a run with a guy like Devers. When you have a bat like that in the lineup, you could overtake the Dodgers. Not many people can say that in the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, right? This is a team that, if you have the opportunity to go do that, why not go out and take advantage now? Why wait till the trade deadline if an opportunity arises?
Yeah, I think it was a great move. It was a little shrewd. Again, Breslow, just like I know Breslow. We were teammates and stuff. So even watching the Netflix series, like he leans on being a little risk averse, right? And I think a lot of GMs and front office baseball presidents probably would lean on that side. But again, it speaks to maybe something was going on in that relationship, and it was kind of, and they rather just move on from that. And I think Buster, to his credit, just went ahead, just like you're saying, take advantage of that opportunity where, you throw out a couple prospects and see what it takes. And ultimately it was enough for Breslow and the Giants to make the move, and the Red Sox to make the move. So it's an important piece. And you're right. If you can make this trade in June, go ahead and do it before that asking price gets too high. And ultimately it was enough for Breslow to make it. And again, for the Giants, it's a great position. Like, who knows he's not going to play third. We got Matt Chapman there. So does that drama follow him to San Francisco? We'll find out. But I think as of right now, it's just definitely, they got the best player in the deal. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, well, I guess it's worth asking along those lines. San Francisco is a tough park to hit in. That said, Devers, we know that there's plenty of pull power. He has all fields power. He's always benefited from Fenway Park being able to drive it out to left center. How do you see that skill set, like his power being able to translate? Are there going to be a bunch of happy kayaks in McCovey Cove, I guess is the way of asking it.
Yeah, I do think he's going to have the pull power, and I think they've been looking for that piece. And obviously Barry Bonds is just, he made it look so easy being able to flip the ball out in the McCovey Cove. But that lefty bat is such an important bat in that lineup because, again, that left field line plays or right field line plays pretty quick. So you can get some off that out of town scoreboard, make some things happen. And, if you want to make fun of his conditioning and all that, I bet you he's going to have a couple triples out there too. He likes to, just like Fenway Park, it's that deep right center field that's going to get a lot of action with his kind of swing path. And I think that is a great bat for him to have. And of course, I think he'll sacrifice a few of the home runs. That's kind of, Lenny will tell you, playing in the Bay, playing in that series, it's just what it is. You sacrifice some of that power, but there's plenty of hits to be had in that ballpark.
Well, that is great perspective, Javi, and we will pick up on more of that because I'm also interested in both what Lenny's about to ask and in picking up on your question of risk aversion. We will jump right back in after the break with 3:10 to left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. Back on 3:10 to left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers, joined by Lenny DiNardo and Javier Lopez, both ring bearers from their Red Sox tenure. And Javi got a few more with the San Francisco Giants. So perfect person to be talking to today about the Rafael Devers trade to the Giants. And Javi, you were talking about risk aversion, like your sense from both knowing Craig Breslow and then especially from seeing him in the Netflix documentary, that he does seem to be, that he had struck you as being somewhat risk averse. Tell me about Buster Posey as a head of baseball operations. What's been your sense about his willingness to kind of put the chips forward and say, and really kind of not overcomplicate like how it is that he's trying to build the best team.
Yeah, and I do think that's something that Buster Posey has right now. He's going to be in the chair for 3 years. He signed a 3-year deal. So he wants to kind of just make the push whenever he can, when it feels it's right. And again, it's the same team basically that you had last year, but you've banked more wins than you had last year, and you find yourself a game out in the NL West. It's a division that has the Padres. The Diamondbacks are starting to play better. Now the Rockies are the Rockies, right? They've struggled, and those are games you have to win. But when it's a 4-team race, you need to figure out what it's going to take for you to get in. And then you look at the wild card picture, there's a chance they get 3 teams in. It's never say never, right? The NL East has some teams that can play, but you have a chance to make the postseason and you have a chance to make a big move. Buster's not afraid to make that move. And I think that is the one thing that, having conversations with him about what's it like talking to some other maybe front offices, whether it's baseball presidents or even some GMs, and having those discussions. A lot of people just want to hold on to those chips. But if you look at AJ Preller with San Diego, like he goes and finds it. He identifies talent. He trades it away, gets a big piece, and goes right back, finds talent, builds it up, trades it away. And you've seen some of the moves they've made. Like, the trade they made for Juan Soto has given the Nationals some cornerstone pieces in Mackenzie Gore and CJ Abrams and so like James those pieces And James Wood, sorry, thank you. Like those are some cornerstone pieces, and he wasn't afraid to make that move because for what they needed, they wanted Juan Soto, and he made that move. So I do think it's one of those things where either you're in or you're out, and I feel like the conversations that even I've had with some front office people that I know that just seems like they want to hold on to those chips, and Buster's not afraid to make the move if it makes sense, and this one for the Giants again because they've needed an impact back for so long made sense.
Javi, I know Craig and Buster, both former players, right? And I feel like in the whole scheme of things, there's not a ton of those out there, front office executives and GMs that played the game, put on uniform, and were in clubhouses in that capacity. The Red Sox, I feel like their front office and Craig in particular are very, what's the word, analytic centric. Maybe there's a lot of analytics when it comes into decisions, whether it's on the field, who they're acquiring, this and that. How was Buster in regards to that? Does he use the eye test? Does he focus solely on that? How does he mix in the numbers as well?
Yeah, I think they're obviously if you're not using the numbers, you're not doing yourself any good. So I do think he uses them, but I think the eye test is important. I think the conversations that he actually has is really important. So he tries to get a feel for the player, and that's why this is an interesting trade. Again, for what has transpired in Boston, the feedback as to the kind of player that Rafi Devers is outweighed whatever conversations or ill will was going on in the clubhouse in Boston. That's why I made the move. But again, it is important. He uses numbers, but numbers are easy, right? They're tangible, they're tactile. There's things you can see and you can remove the player out of it. But I do think the eye test is important. And you see a way the guys pitch Rafi Devers and the guys, all the opponents, and you look at the Yankees and how they can't get him out. Like he's a Yankee killer, and it's important when you see how teams go about approaching those at bats. You realize that this guy's got to make adjustments, and he's able to make those adjustments. Not only this year, but he's made it for the 9 years that he's been a Red Sox. So it's just it's. I think there's just a few more things that he likes to check on, and I think a lot of that is eyeball test, whether he's watching him personally or he has guys go out and watch Rafi Devers or whatever other Major League Baseball player that they have eyes on. He wants that. He wants the eye test as well as the analytics.
I know the eye test and the numbers are going to show you that this type of Rafael Devers is different than the one we've seen in years past as far as seeing different pitches, not expanding outside the strike zone. He's not chasing as much. And I feel like that has a lot to do with him getting in certain situations to be able to drive the ball. Pitchers have to come to him because he's constantly being walked. He's at a clip where we haven't seen him throughout his career. So the old Ted Williams mantra of get a good pitch to hit and then put a charge in it, get it in the air. He's taken that. So, I mean, that's a numbers thing. That's also an eye test thing. It's plain as the nose on my face right now that he's been different this season.
Yeah, and that's something that kind of jumps off the page for me when you make this move. It was like, wow, this is a guy that you could argue right now. Again, it's early, but you could argue that this is going to end up being his best season for the reasons that you just pointed out. He's able to now dictate the counts a little bit more. He's not chasing. He's still hitting for power, and he's hitting for extra base hits. Like he's doing lots of things, and the average is what the average is. But you could see that going to steadily increase as well. But the way he's able to command a strike zone makes him a scary hitter, and it's just really really interesting to see how that will play going forward.
So, given how well Devers has been performing as a hitter this year, and he, clearly the best hitter in the Red Sox lineup, right? Like one of the best, probably 5 hitters in Major League Baseball since his bad first week of the season. Outrageous performance. How does this make sense for the Red Sox from a baseball standpoint? Is this, obviously there's a cultural component to that. So even for an analytically driven front office, they're making moves that deal with something that is not tactile and that is a bit more ineffable. But from a baseball trade standpoint, Javi, you've seen Kyle Harrison. You have seen, do you think that Kyle Harrison is going to be a major league starting pitcher? Obviously the fastball is a great, like it has some great qualities to it. Is he going to have the overall mix and command to remain a starting pitcher? And if so, kind of where do you slot him in the future?
Well, I mean, Lenny could speak to this better than I could because he actually got the ball to start games. But I'm going to say that his stuff plays. I think what gets Kyle in trouble is being able to land the secondary stuff. And unless you have an absolute elite fastball, it is hard to pitch with one pitch in the big leagues, let alone be a starter with one pitch. Now we've seen it, it's happened, but it's hard. And I think with that arm angle, you never know if you're throwing a slurve or if you're throwing a slider or you're throwing a little bit of a cutter. It's just because he's got that low 3/4 release. And maybe being around Garrett Crochet will help a little bit. That maybe he's going to be able to bounce some ideas off of him or maybe some grips. But that's the ultimate X factor for me when it comes to what Kyle Harrison can do and what his ceiling will be. The velocity has picked up. He's still throwing in the upper 90s. So that's an encouraging sign. But it's the ability to command the strike zone, which we all know as a pitcher, you need to be able to throw strikes, especially with secondary pitches. But that's what Andrew Bailey's task will be, and or whoever's down in Worcester, that'll be their job right now, to be able to figure out how we're going to land the off speeds, because you face the Yankees, you face the other Rays, even the Orioles. Say what you want, they can hit fastballs. So it's a matter of being able to pitch backwards at some times to set up the other stuff, and I think maybe that's where Crochet will be very beneficial. But I do think he can be a starter in the big leagues, but that's going to come at being able to land the secondary stuff. And if not, he's going to be one heck of I can kind of see him in an Andrew Miller role where it'll be a multiple inning setup guy, closer guy. I mean, he's got so many options as long as he stays healthy.
Yeah, so this is not your grandfather's 96 miles an hour, right? 96 back when we played was different, right? You know, you'd have a guy throwing 96, 98, every other team, maybe one guy in the bullpen. Now every team's got a guy throwing 97, 98, 100 miles an hour. But you're right, you know, being able to throw that, great stuff like that will get you to the big leagues, but staying in the big leagues is a different matter, right? It's about being able to command that, set it up well, get yourself in high pitchers leverage counts, and being able to put guys away. And with the low 3/4 arm angle like that, I'm not sure, you know, if he's trying to throw three different pitches, a curve, cutter, slider, whatever it is. And I tried that at one point, right? And they all turned into the same pitch, and it wasn't a good pitch, right? So I got rid of the slider, I kept the curveball, 4-12-6, and I kept the cutter, which is my best pitch. I threw it 80% of the time or something thereabouts. So again, getting with Andrew Bailey, getting with the Worcester pitching coach as well, and figuring out what makes him his best type of pitcher is going to be key for him. And recognizing that, okay, when I'm in the strike zone to start at bats, being able to get ahead with strikes and get them out with balls and get that chase pitch is going to be key for him. And to go back to your first point, the only time I ever threw 96 is when they accidentally switched the radar gun to kilometers. Okay, so I don't know that much about this kind of stuff, but I appreciate it.
Well, you know, I got to look out for my lefties, so I appreciate that. You know, I'm always looking out for you, Lenny.
I tried your
I,
arm angle at the end of my career. It was way more difficult than I thought it would be, and I was out of the game the next year. So kudos to you as well.
Oh, thank you.
I mean, it is incredible though. Like as we talk about Kyle Harrison, he's probably the headliner on this package. James Tibbs the third, who my son thought sounded like the name of a British, like, you know, a British sitcom or something. You know, is a guy who's in high A, first round pick last year. So there's obviously some ceiling there. I think that generally speaking, it's viewed as the ceiling of an everyday player. There's trade value there, certainly throughout the industry, but he's not a now piece. Save for perhaps as a trade, as a trade chip. But even then, that's down the road. Kyle Harrison, headline, not available in the big leagues right now because they're optioning him to AAA with an idea of let's develop some of the things. And as you referenced the cutter, Lenny, it was funny for me. I was like, oh, what are the odds that Andrew Bailey might work with someone on developing a cutter? We might see another one of those projects. You know, Jordan Hicks, someone who's been on the injured list with the toe issue with the Giants, so he's not available immediately. For you guys, are you like, does it stun you that Rafael Devers gets traded by the Red Sox at a time when they're just pushing their way into the wild card race and they do not have a major league return, a right now major league contributor?
For me, word
I'll take
is
it
certainty.
Yeah, go ahead. I was going to say, I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Javi's the guest.
That's what I was thinking. I said for the Giants got the best player in this deal. Again, I mean, it's who knows what's going to happen in the future, right? You can't plan this out, but when you had the opportunity to add the bat, they added the bat. So it's an easy play for the Giants to be successful, and you will take the L if Harrison turns out to be Chris Sale or anybody in that realm. I mean, you'll take the loss, but you're not looking 5 years down the road. You're looking now, and I think that's why Buster made that move.
Yeah, it's absolutely, for me, it's certainty. I feel like you can bet your bottom dollar that Rafael Devers is going to continue to hit the ball for a long, long time. There's no certainty that prospects are going to pan out. We've seen a year in and year out, certain guys are great, certain guys don't pan out. It's a flip of a coin, really, and it has a lot to do with some of the things that are out of their control and who's going to help them be their best selves. But yeah, I feel like it was a culture thing as well. It was getting Rafael Devers in another uniform to help prevent the Red Sox going in a direction where they have a lot of young players, looking to the adults in the room to see how the culture in the Red Sox locker room is going to play out, and how should the culture in the Red Sox clubhouse play out. These are guys that the big three in Campbell and Anthony and Meyer that are moldable right now. What kind of veterans are they going to turn out to be? And I feel like the Red Sox in general want them to look at the Refsnyders, at the Bregmans, at the Romies, the guys that play hard day in and day out, that whether they're starting that day or they're off the bench that day or just role players, who do they want them to mimic and see how they go about their day? And I think those are great examples of the type of players they want them to be. And if you add that with the amount of talent that they have, they're going to be superstars as well. This is a young club. It's a young family, so to speak, right? And if the young family is driving a Formula One race car, is that going to help that young family in their day-to-day activities? Probably not. But later on, in a few years, when you've got 4 Formula One race cars, they're going to be racing around the country and they're going to be playing really, really good baseball. So at the time, where they're at right now, it wasn't the best fit, if that analogy makes sense.
Well, well, so, thinking about the minivan of players that came back, and also the
I've got
F1 for minivan swap. Javi, I want to let's kind of wrap up with this. So I began by asking about the Manny Ramirez trade, and there are, for me, some parallels, because there was a young core coming with the Red Sox then, right? Like, that was a very young second year Pedroia. Granted, he ended up being the MVP that year. That was
Right.
there were, Ellsbury was finding his footing as an everyday player. To you, how, when you think back to '08 and what happened with the Red Sox after Manny was traded, was it beneficial, even as Manny destroyed the world as a member of the Dodgers down the stretch that year? Was that a good baseball trade if you look at it in hindsight?
I think I do. Manny, as great as he was an interesting teammate, to say the least. And I think when you look at, to Lenny's point, who do you want your young guys to follow? And this is where the game has changed. So Lenny was in that clubhouse, and I was in that clubhouse. There was salty veterans in the, like, now your salty guys are 28, 29. It's when I was there, you had Mikey Lowell and you had Kurt Schilling, and you had on the just, I mean, up and down that whole roster, even David Ortiz. It's just like you had older guys that you wanted to kind of take charge. And I think that's where the Red Sox are finding themselves right now. It's like, who do you want to follow? Into Lenny's point, there's guys that you want, and you don't want to take the hunger away from the young players, and they're going to have it. I watched Campbell here play at Georgia Tech, and I just love the way he played, and I loved his. No matter what the situation was, that guy was busting his tail to make some plays and hit and run and do all the things. And you don't want to ever take that away, because you want to defer that stuff to a veteran player. And I think that's the one thing that Bregman has been great about, where even with the Astros, when it was a younger team, he never asked guys to be different. He just asked them to have a little bit more fine focus. And I think that is where the evolution of what this Red Sox offenses and just overall team is going to head that way. Alex Cora, I played with him, and I love Alex. And I think Alex may not give off the vibe all the time, maybe in the media and things like that, but the guy wants hardcore play for the 2.5 hours that you're out there. And beyond that, be a live your life. But when you show up, it's time to produce. And I think those are the things that, now you can do now that you have, I don't want to, we'll just call it a distraction. Now that Raffy's out, it is now time to take this team and move it forward. And I think that is something that's pretty exciting when you look at that side of it. Again, there's scar tissue, and you're not going to get away with that. With the Manny Ramirez trade, Nomar trade way back to get some pieces that were going to help you. Nomar was being difficult during the trade, during the contract situation. Mookie Betts, Chris Sale, there's scar tissue, and I get it as a fan base. I get that. But when you look at it, you try to paint the rosy picture, right? That you hope you hit on one of these guys. And we'll see. We'll find out. But the Red Sox have a lot of young talent, and now it's time for them to step up.
Well, Javi, this has been incredible perspective. The next time that you're broadcasting Giants games, you're going to be seeing a very different Giants lineup. And I guess the next time that Lenny is looking at a Red Sox, if Lenny and I are looking at the Red Sox lineup, we'll also be looking at a very different lineup. Javi, incredible perspective. Thank you so much for joining us on 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. Look forward to catching up again down the road.
Guys, I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Good seeing you, Javi.
Back at 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. And that was great stuff from Javier Lopez. Fantastic perspective, particularly hearing about the conversations that he was having with Buster Posey in the last week about Buster Posey's great and abiding desire to get a bat. He got one. We also got perspective on the trade from, in kind of balancing the perspectives, but with a particular bent towards the Giants' perspective on an emergency podcast of 310 to Left last night, Sunday night, when Tom Karen and I talked to JP Ricciardi, who spent a number of years working in the Giants front office. And here is what JP Ricciardi had to say upon learning of the Rafael Devers trade to the Giants.
Well, I think the first thing I look at is the actual baseball trade. The Giants made a great trade. They just got a hell of an offensive player that they desperately need to go with their really good pitching. I think this is a stamp for them that puts them in a position to challenge the Dodgers and be one of the leading teams for the wild card. I think on the return side, Kyle Harrison has struggled and is possibly at best a fourth starter or maybe a bullpen piece. Jordan Hicks is a bullpen piece. He's failed as a starter. The kid that they got from Tibbs kid from Florida State has really struggled in high A, and his main thing that he can do is hit, and he hasn't done that. He's probably a bat-only guy at this point. So when I look at it from an evaluation standpoint, I think the Giants clearly won the trade. But this runs a lot deeper than just that. And what it tells me is the Red Sox really wanted to get rid of Rafael Devers, because I think if they put him on the market, they could have got a better package back. I think if you waited to the trading deadline or in the offseason, you could have got a better package. But I think he must be becoming somewhat of a nuisance in the clubhouse in the sense that the young players, this is not the guy that should be the leader for them. But it's a heck of an offensive player that you just gave up.
So Lenny, you've heard it from Javier Lopez, you've heard it from JP Ricciardi. What are your thoughts on this trade from the Giants' perspective? How different a team do they seem like to you now that they have Rafael Devers?
Oh, I mean, they're making a push, and they're making it sooner than most teams would have. Typically it's trade deadline. That's where you see these big, surprising, shocking moves. But they saw an opening. They took it. The Red Sox obviously wanted to get rid of him. Why else would you get rid of one of the best hitters in the game for close to a decade, really, for uncertainty? And when you talk about uncertainty, you're talking about some guys that are in the minor leagues, a guy that's hurt, a few guys that have tried to be starters and haven't really succeeded at all. Good stuff there. And we've seen it before where they'll bring guys in and hand them to Andrew Bailey and see if he can tinker with their style of pitching and see if he can get the most out of what they bring to the table. But again, there's nothing certain about it whatsoever. So I think, again, just to say what I said earlier, to talk about what JP just said, is this is them basically getting rid of Rafael for whatever reason. We don't know what happens behind closed doors. The media is in the clubhouse for a finite amount of time, And sometimes we just don't know. So to me, that says there's something in the clubhouse, something happening in the clubhouse that they wanted to nip in the bud really quickly. And when the brass came to Kansas City a few weeks ago and talked to Rafael Devers, and really nothing happened since then. So I think that speaks to, okay, he was staying steady on his thoughts about changing and helping the club on the field or in the clubhouse, and they had to make a decision. They had to move on, and it was a tough decision. Obviously, did it make the Red Sox better? Absolutely not. The Red Sox they're not a better team than they were yesterday, but it doesn't mean that they can't be a better team in the future. In the long term. In the short term, we'll see here relatively quickly. This is a team that went out and have taken 5 or 6 from the New York Yankees, a team that is playing better baseball now. And in that stint, Rafael Devers was okay with 9 for 50 something, I believe. He's a guy in the lineup that's going to help your club, help those around them. But the reason why they're winning ball games, to me, is the pitching, right? These guys are getting deeper into ball games. Their run prevention has been so much better. They're getting deeper into games. It's helping the bullpen be able to have more days off and therefore be more effective. So it's to be known. But obviously, there was some urgency there as far as getting him into another clubhouse stat.
Well, I think that the urgency question is an interesting one on a couple of fronts, right? One component of it, you've talked about the cultural component, and particularly now that the young guys are up, I do wonder whether or not Roman Anthony getting called up was potentially an accelerant, because now maybe it really is the case that you need to define what the clubhouse is going to be moving forward. The other part of it is, Wilyer Abreu is going to be coming back at the end of the week. So you were about to have an interesting bottleneck forming. And so perhaps that was an accelerant. To me, I'm interested in your thoughts. There's not another Rafael Devers who's going to be added to the roster anytime soon. However, Wilyer Abreu is coming back. You do have Masataka Yoshida, who now maybe has the DH path to come back and could potentially be an offensive contributor. And you also maybe have Bregman coming back, let's say in the next few weeks. That might be a conversation before the All-Star break. Is there a path for the Red Sox to have do you anticipate that the Red Sox poised for an offensive collapse, or do you think that they can kind of weather the loss of the departure of Devers and still have an offense that can function, assuming that the pitching staff continues to build on what it's done recently?
Yeah, so I feel like if the pitching staff continues with how they've been going in the past 10, 15 days or so, whatever it is, where they've been getting deep into games, I feel like that's going to cover up any sort of offensive struggle. And again, this offense isn't better today than it was yesterday, but the DH situation, when you do have Bregman, Abreu, Yoshida returning relatively soon, and with this move, also, you get to keep Anthony up in the big leagues longer. It creates that path. I feel like they're not going to be as bad as people are saying right away after this move. I feel like you're losing a great hitter, but you also have some guys that have the capability to go out there and fill some of this hole that they just created for themselves. And I'm not sure how close Yoshida is going to be. He hasn't hit in a long time. Trajex is great, but it's not on the field at Fenway Park when it counts, when the lights are brightest. That's going to be to be seen. Abreu, we've seen him kind of go up and down offensively, which is the name of the game, right? It's going to happen. You're going to struggle at points, but it's being able to dig yourself out of that hole as well and get back to where what he's capable of doing, and that's a really high ceiling. But we'll see. That protection's not there right now that Rafael Devers has created in the lineup, and it's going to affect the hitters around him as well. So we're going to see how that unfolds too. So again, if they do struggle offensively, I do feel like the pitching, if they continue to go out there and throw strikes effectively and get deep into games, it will cover some of that up.
And to your point, Lenny, they're going to be leaning hard on young players, whether it's Abreu or, of course, Christian Campbell, Marcelo Meyer, and Roman Anthony, for their offense to be adequate, to even with good pitching, they're going to need contributions coming from those guys and can't have it overwhelm them. But great conversation so far. We're going to throw it to break once again. 3:10 to left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. Lenny and I are going to be back to wrap it up pretty shortly. Back on 310 to left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers, and there's a lot to digest. We're just starting to digest it. It is going to take a while to do so, which kind of actually is where I wanted to wrap this up, Lenny. How long does it take a clubhouse to make sense of a landmark trade like this? How long does it take? Is there an adjustment period from a player's and on-field perspective for a team to kind of recenter its identity after having a franchise player dealt?
Well, that's the thing. You really don't have a lot of time to digest this. Yeah, you're on the plane yesterday to Seattle, which is a long flight. There's your opportunity right there. You can sleep on it last night, but once it comes down to it, you have a game to play, right? You don't have time to mourn Rafael Devers going away. You got to go out there and you got to think about what's happening in real time on the field because there's no time to do anything else. If you're thinking on the field, you're not reacting. If you're not reacting, you're not going to be successful at the big league level. So you have to be able to compartmentalize. You're losing a teammate. I'm sure you had a lot of friends in that clubhouse, but you got to let that go. You got to go out there and get strike one. If you're a hitter, you got to go out there and capitalize on mistakes. If you're on the defense, catch it and throw it. That's what's going to help this team be successful in the long run. So again, no time to think, react.
Well, there is a reaction time. It's going to be a little bit longer than that for Craig Breslow. This is a landmark decision, right? We've now in the span of 8 months or so seen a few of those. In this case, you've not only dealt Rafael Devers, but now you're also going to have to figure out how to build the roster, how to rebuild the roster in some ways without him. And possibly, the Red Sox now have resources. They have money, $254 million that was going to be headed Rafael Devers' way. That's now back in their pockets. They also have an increased amount of capital for trades. I don't like referring to people as capital, but I did so there. My apologies to James Tibbs, Kyle Harrison et al. They will have the ability to make trades. And so it's kind of up to the players right now to stick around and position the Red Sox where they can perhaps use some of those resources in a way that would feed 2025. But Lenny DiNardo, this has been a fantastic conversation. Thanks so much for joining. It's been great to see you.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on.
Well, we will be back soon on Wednesday or into Thursday with another episode of 310 to Left. And I think maybe Tom, Karen, and I will be in the same place at the same time. One can only hope. But thank you all for joining 310 to Left, brought to you by your New England Ford dealers. See you soon.